Hey YouTube, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2024. I just want to say my wife and I are doing well, and I hope you and your loved ones are doing well too. Starting off my video projects this year, I'm going to be talking about something that I wanted to tackle for a while. Originally, I wanted to do like a figure painting guide for diorama builders, but lately I've seen so many good videos on this kind of topic where it's the armor modeler's guide to figure painting or something along those lines, and I think it's a good sign that there's more and more people that are diving into vignettes, adding that sense of scale and the figure to their armor build or um, their storytelling aspect if they're getting into more dioramas. So I was trying to think what could I add to this. So I figured I could contribute more of an artistic approach. Say you've mastered the good enough for my tank commander figure. But you're wondering, how do I maybe progress to that next step? Maybe I want to do just a standalone figure. Maybe I want to get into, I don't know, more serious figure painting. I think I can at least point you in the right direction. I'm not going to go too much into like color theory, or instead let's talk about our most prevalent light sources, the sun and the ambient light of the sky. If you want, you can get into other light sources, object light sources, or OSL. There's a ton of videos on that too. It's a whole different topic. For this video, let's just stick with the sun and the ambient light of the sky. So the direct light of the sun is going to give a warm yellow hue, while the sky is going to produce more of like a softer, cooler blue-gray tone. So these two light sources are going to mix with the local color, which is basically just whatever the inherent color of that object is, and it's going to give us this kind of atmospheric depth. And it's what we're used to seeing with our eyes, and if you can achieve that on your model, it's going to look that much better. Now, I'm not saying I'm a master at this, but again, I think I can at least point you in the right direction. What you have to think about is shadows aren't black and highlights aren't white. So shadows are often a cool blue-gray, and then the highlights are more of a warm yellow-white, like an off-white. Again, this is because the shadows are actually still being lit with that ambient light, which is predominantly from the sky, while the highlights are being lit by the sun, which again is more of a warm off-white, like a yellowish tinted white. So with that in mind, if we take our three flesh colors, if we treat those three colors like kind of like the local color of the flesh, then we can start to add some of those atmospheric effects, the depth from the sun and the sky, and we can push those colors a little further. We can get that direct sunlight with a little bit of yellow. We can get the ambient shadows by adding a little bit of blue in there. We start to put red in there, especially in like the nose, the lips, the cheeks, where there's going to be more blood close to the surface of the skin. And this not only preserves the saturation of those colors, but it can further amplify it. And we can start to take these kind of like standard, good enough for an accompanying figure in a larger diorama kind of a thing, and we can start to take it and push the bounds of more figure painting, standalone figure painting, artistic figure painting. So if the local color of the flesh was like a kind of like a pinkish tan, a warm tan color, maybe like even a red, if we add blue to it, the shadows almost become more of this kind of gray, like almost like a deep purple, not quite that much blue that we're going to make it noticeable, but you're just going to start adding a little bit of blue to that dark shadow color and kind of pull it into the grays a little bit. Like anything else in the hobby, when you push the contrast, in this case between the cool gray and the warm highlights, it further adds interest, and it makes the model that much more readable from a farther distance away. You can take that kind of blue-gray shadow color, you can mix a little of that with your mid-tone, your local color, your standard flesh color, whatever you're using as that middle base, and start blending your shadows into your mid-tones. Then eventually just moving into straight mid-tones, maybe add a little yellow to your straight mid-tones if they're going to be more lit by the sun. And then eventually with your highlights, these areas that are getting the most direct light, and also wind up being, in many cases, the areas of the flesh that have the most blood, right there by the surface. You add a little bit of that red, you continue to emphasize the warm tones. Maybe it's a figure like this in the desert. It's going to have a sunburn, something like that. Maybe they been running around in the battlefield. They're exhausted. They're fatigued. They've got a flushed face. So again, the cheeks, the nose, the lips, maybe the hands too. Just a little bit of that kind of reddish color, just to give it a little bit more of that lively look. The other thing to take away from this video, I think, is just if you watch the way that I'm painting the figure, I'm really doing essentially the same brush stroke, and my brush stroke is very similar to the way I would use a pencil if I was writing or sketching or something like that. So I'm making basically the same brush strokes. I'm just manipulating the model in my other hand so that the brush strokes go the direction they need to without having to, in most cases, without having to put my brush hand in an awkward position. I mean, I am trying to paint around the camera as well. Probably a lot more footage that's just the back of my head or the back of my hand or something like that I just tried to cut out. But when I'm painting without the camera, I really am trying to get in the habit of just making the same stroke over and over again and just manipulating the model in the best way to be able to make that stroke without disrupting kind of the natural movement of my hand. You might notice too, if I'm painting highlights or if I'm painting shadows, I might orient the model in a way where I'm looking in the same direction as that light source would come from. So I'm going to be painting highlights from the top down, so that I'm making sure that I'm only hitting those areas that would be exposed, or I'm flipping the model upside down and making sure I'm getting all the shadow areas. That's the biggest reason I do the zenithal highlight, with the spray cans there. It's not so much that I'm doing any kind of like translucent painting where this is going to show through in the end, so the quality of the primer coat doesn't really matter. This one, I mean, it's all perfectly level. It's a self-leveling primer, but it definitely has a more of a splattered kind of appearance, and I'm not concerned about it because I'm painting to 100% opacity, but I'm just using this zenithal primer as kind of a cheat sheet and like a roadmap so that I can quickly visualize those highlights and those shadows regardless of how I'm orienting the model. But like in this case where I'm rotating the model around, I'm viewing it from the direction of that shadow color too. So between visualizing the model from the light source and then manipulating the model so that the brush strokes are more natural, I think just in terms of a more technical approach with the painting, I think it's really helpful just to make the process that much more intuitive. So the brush I'm using is a pretty cheap brush. It's just an AK, I don't know, 2030, something like that. It's pretty beat up. It's not great. I'm using a wet palette, which I think is really important, but these are just standard hobby paints. There's nothing artistic grade about these. They're not high-end paints. They're not oils. They're not not something you probably don't already have on the bench. Like anything else, the tools are important. If you really want to be like a competitive figure painter, you're probably going to want to invest in better brushes, better paints. This isn't really a video about competition or anything like that. I think it's a good next step. If you've already gotten a handle on figure painting, if you're already happy with how your figures look alongside your tanks, if you're starting to feel like you want to move beyond just that accessory figure and maybe have a more of a spotlight figure or like a character figure, something that you really want to just like a standalone figure that is worth looking at on its own without having all the accompanying tank and village or destroyed city or whatever as part of this larger scene. I think looking into color theory, looking into how to mix your own colors and how to get these different blends that are unique to each figure, it's probably going to help in the long run. And again, this isn't an all-encompassing video by any means. This isn't a video on color theory. It's definitely not a video on object source lighting. There's all these other techniques and tricks and videos out there, and I highly recommend that you go and check all those out. But if you hadn't considered painting your shadows with a blue tone, painting your highlights with more of a yellow tone, adding more of that red into areas of the figure that are going to have more blood flow, or the blood's going to be closer to the surface of the skin. I think that's just really the key takeaway is look into it, see if it's something that makes sense to you, see if it's something you want to incorporate, and definitely reconsider trying to darken colors with black or trying to lighten colors with white, because you're just going to wind up killing your saturation. The figures, especially flesh tones, are going to start looking less and less lively. But I mean, I'm definitely interested in hearing people's thoughts on this, because I think it's such a unique part of the hobby, figure painting. Because it's, in my opinion, it's more in line with traditional painting, artistic painting, oil painting, watercolor painting. I think it's more organic, obviously, than like a tank or an airplane, and I think there's so much more room for artistic interpretation and different concepts of the term realism. I mean, we're not talking about rust, and we're not talking about paint chips and perfect color matches and things like that. I mean, every person is probably somewhat unique in one way or the other, right? And so, I mean, we're dealing with unique mixes of color. We're dealing with maybe more traditional artistic approaches like this, where you're adding blues and yellows and reds into colors that you might not normally perceive as blue, yellow, or red. But I don't know. I think it's one of those things where if you're happy with your figure work and it fits in with your armor and your aircraft and your diorama, your vignette, whatever it is, then I don't think there's any reason to change it. But if you're looking at your figure work and you're not quite happy with it, you're not quite sure what it is that's missing, look into color theory, look into traditional painting. I think I've learned more about figure painting with models by learning from traditional artists, portrait artists, oil painters, watercolor painters, things like that. It's just something about the way we perceive people, and again that organic quality, as opposed to like just the metal of a tank. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point. Thanks for watching, guys. There's going to be some still photos and close-ups at the end. In the future, I think my wife and I are going to try to do this together, where she's filming while I'm doing this, just to make the whole process a little more worthwhile for the viewer. And just looking at the back of my head or the back of my hand. But let me know your thoughts on this more artistic approach and figure painting in general, because I know I don't know everything, and I'm still trying to learn. And this is really the first figure I think that I've truly kind of dove into head first in terms of this much blue, this much yellow, this much red. So it's something I'm still trying to figure out myself. But again, looking forward to hearing everybody's thoughts. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the final photos, and see you more this year.